What would Europe look like today if Constantinople had fallen in 17 AD? Not 1453. No Charlemagne crowning ceremony in a Christian Rome. No Crusades launched from a secure western flank. No Reconquista. No Vienna. The entire domino sequence of Western history depends on a single assumption, that those walls held. And they did. But almost nobody knows why, or how close it actually came to going the other way. This is the story of the siege that textbooks skip. The siege that by every military calculation of the time should have ended in an Umayyad flag flying over the Bosphorus. 80,000 soldiers, 1,800 ships, the full weight of the most powerful empire on earth, against 15,000 defenders and a set of walls. Today we're going to tell you exactly what happened, and exactly what didn't. To understand why those walls held against everything thrown at them, you have to understand what they actually were. Theodosius II ordered their construction after Rome fell to the Goths in 410. And the city he was building wouldn't share Rome's fate. His Praetorian prefect Anthemius supervised the first phase, completed around 413. Then devastating earthquakes struck in 437 and 447, which meant the walls weren't merely repaired, but dramatically expanded. The civilian population completed the work in 2 months because the Huns were in the Balkans and time had run out. What emerged from that urgency was the most elaborate urban fortification system the ancient or medieval world ever produced. The design operated on a principle that modern military strategists call defense in depth, except it was executed in limestone and brick 15 centuries before the term existed. An attacker first faced a moat 20 meters wide and 7 meters deep, which could be flooded on command and retained by a series of dams. Beyond the moat stood an outer wall 9 meters high, with 92 towers and a patrol track overlooking the water below. Behind that wall lay an inner terrace, 16 to 21 meters wide, that gave defenders a clear firing platform down onto anyone who had made it past the outer defenses. Behind the terrace rose the inner wall, 12 meters high and nearly 5 meters thick, bristling with 96 towers spaced roughly 70 meters apart, each capable of holding up to 3 artillery machines. The towers on the outer wall were deliberately offset from those on the inner wall, so that neither blocked the other's field of fire. The total depth from the moat to the inner wall was 60 meters with a height advantage of 30 meters from the bottom of the ditch to the top of the main wall. Even if attackers scaled the outer wall, they were trapped on that inner terrace, exposed to fire from above, with no cover and no way forward except into a taller wall, reinforced with towers and siege engines. Greek fire, the Byzantine incendiary weapon that could be poured or fired in grenades at anyone below, completed the problem that no pre-gunpowder army in history could solve. Which brings us to the sieges, and the record there is something the standard account almost never tells you. The walls never failed for 800 years. The Avars and Persians came in 626, with siege engines and bombarded the Theodosian Walls directly. But the walls held, and the Avars couldn't coordinate with the Persian fleet. The first Arab siege arrived in 674, and lasted 4 years, with the walls withstanding catapults and sustained assault. And they held again. Then came the siege that decided the shape of the next 1,000 years, the Second Arab Assault that opened this story. Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik's army built siege lines to blockade the city by land, while the fleet closed off the sea, and the Theodosian Walls faced the full weight of the assault on the landward side. The Arab fleet was partly neutralized almost immediately when the Byzantine navy deployed Greek fire against it, which allowed Constantinople to be resupplied by sea even while the siege continued on land. Then the winter came, and it was brutal. The chronicles described famine and disease devastating the besieging army, far more than the besieged city. The fortifications had allowed the defenders to stockpile provisions for years in advance, and Constantinople's massive cisterns ensured a water supply that no blockade could exhaust. The emperor had ordered any family without 3 years of provisions to flee the city before the siege began. And that is the kind of confidence those walls gave the men who stood on them. When spring arrived in 1718, the situation for the Arabs collapsed from every direction. 2 reinforcement fleets were sent to finish the job, but their Christian crews defected and the Byzantines destroyed both fleets. An overland relief force marching through Asia Minor was ambushed and defeated, and the Bulgars attacked the Arab rear, inflicting heavy casualties. On August 15th, 718, the Arabs lifted the siege, and the retreating fleet was nearly annihilated by storms off the coast of Lycia. Muslim sources record 150,000 dead, while Western sources put the figure at 300,000. The Caliphate had thrown everything it had at those walls, and the walls had broken the army instead of the army breaking the walls. The strategic consequence was immediate and permanent. The Caliphate abandoned the goal of conquering Constantinople outright, and the Muslim advance into southeastern Europe was postponed for centuries. Historians consider this siege one of the most consequential battles in history, since its failure ensured the continued survival of the Byzantine Empire and altered the strategic outlook of the Islamic world. After 17, the pattern continued. Bulgarian Khan Krum arrived before the walls in 1813, after crushing a Byzantine army and killing Emperor Nikephoros I. And he found there was nothing he could do against them and withdrew. Thomas the Slav besieged the city in 821, and failed Russian attacks came in 860, 941, and 1043 with the same result. For 8 centuries, no force ever breached those walls by assault. But the record also shows something else, and this is where the argument sharpens. The walls only ever failed twice, and neither time because the fortifications themselves were defeated. In 1204, the Knights of the Fourth Crusade breached the defenses of Constantinople, and they got in not because the walls were overwhelmed, but because a door was left open. The chronicles are clear on this point. The fortifications hadn't failed, but the people manning them had, and that distinction matters because it tells you where the vulnerability actually was. The second failure is the one everyone knows. In early April 1453, Sultan Mehmed II brought his army to the walls, and with it a new weapon, cannon cast by an engineer named Urban, possibly of Hungarian origin. The Theodosian Walls hadn't been designed to withstand bombardment, because no stone fortification in history had ever needed to. The cannon fire significantly damaged sections of the walls, but the defenders repeatedly repaired the breaches and fought off Ottoman assaults, led by the Genoese commander Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, with 700 soldiers. The Ottomans also failed with a siege tower and with multiple attempts to mine under the walls. For weeks, the defenders held even against the new technology, because the stone could still be repaired faster than cannon fire could destroy it. On May 29th, 1453, Giustiniani was wounded and withdrew from the walls, and his Genoese soldiers panicked around the Pempton Gate. A small band of Ottoman soldiers slipped through the Kirkoporta, a postern that may have been left unsecured. The Janissaries breached the fortifications around the gates of St. Romanos and Carisius. Emperor Constantine XI was killed in the final assault, according to tradition. The walls fell, but not because they were obsolete or because the design had been surpassed. They fell because gunpowder had arrived, and gunpowder was a technological paradigm shift that no wall of stone could resist. Now here is the question the sources actually answer. Constantinople sat on a direct overland path between the Islamic world and Western Europe. Across that 1,000-year span, the Theodosian Walls forced expansionist pressure to be absorbed by Byzantium, rather than redirected into the European heartland. While other great cities of antiquity fell, Rome and Antioch and Alexandria among them, Constantinople remained impregnable because the walls redirected the weight of every siege back onto the besiegers. The siege of 717 and 718 is the hinge point. Had Constantinople fallen then, there was nothing between the Umayyad Caliphate and the Balkans. And Western Europe in the early 8th century was a patchwork of fragmented kingdoms with no capacity to absorb that kind of pressure. The record shows what the walls preserved wasn't just a city. It was the civilizational space that allowed Western Europe to emerge from the early medieval period. Consider what the men on those ramparts actually held. They weren't defending a wall, but the idea that the pressure could be held, and for 1,000 years, the record proved them right. Those walls were never outdated, never outgrown, and never defeated by any army that fought them on their own terms. They held until a technology arrived that no 5th century builder could have anticipated. Subscribe if you want the record, not the revision.